Cool. So we should be, let me open up the chat here and see. Um, all right. Are folks hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Um, so yeah, we are recording this webinar and it's going to be uploaded on our AIMHO 365 YouTube page. And that link is available on the aimho.org website. So feel free to check that website to view this webinar after it's done and then to see some upcoming webinars. And you can also submit a proposal to host your own webinar. So at the end of the webinar, there's going to be a short survey. So if you have time and wouldn't mind filling it out, that would be phenomenal. Thank you again, Brad Shea, Jed Cummins, and Dave Wilcox. We're very excited to hear from you all about our role in campus safety. So I'll turn it over to you all. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you. We thank everybody for joining us today, and thank you for helping us work through some technical issues here. We're going to kick off your role in campus safety, but before we do, I'm going to ask Dave to introduce himself, and then Jed, and then I'll introduce myself, and we'll be rolling.
Yeah, so we're excited to meet everyone over the phone, I guess. My name is Dave Wilcox. I'm the executive director out in California, Tropicana Student Living. I have a long-standing relationship to the AIMHO region. I was, I guess, birthed my AIMHO way back in the late 90s, 1998, I guess, when I was an undergrad and a grad student at the University of Northern Colorado, and then also an area coordinator at the University of Northern Colorado. So I've been out in California for 15, 16 years, I guess, but still call AIMHO my home. So excited to meet you all.
Thanks, Dave.
And again, this is Jed. I am also at the University of Northern Colorado, currently serving as an assistant director for our housing services area, so doing a lot with our custodial maintenance, as well as a host of other things. And I come to UNC from my undergrad here, and then I also had a brief stint out in Texas at Texas Tech University.
Thanks, Jed. So I'm Brad Shade, and I'm also a UNC guy, and I was way back, started here, collected a couple of degrees, and since moved to two other institutions, one in Idaho, one in Kansas. This is my third directorship, and we have had our share of different campus safety events over the years, and so we thought we would share a little bit of some of the things that we've learned and some of the things that we know, and we just wanted to give a little more exposure to some of these things that we maybe all can learn from one another. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So, and the first thing here is a quick disclaimer. We recognize that some of the things that we're going to talk about may be some things that could be triggering, and so if that's something that does occur for you, by all means, you're certainly welcome to mute for a moment there, wait till we go to another screen or whatnot. That's fine. We certainly want you to do a little bit of self-care. We are going to be posting a copy of this presentation, so if you want additional notes than what you're seeing here, that's fine. Otherwise, just listen in. So let's jump into the next one here. So quickly, program overview. We're going to talk about the various types of emergencies that you could deal with, and then we're going to talk a little bit about those perceptions, those things that whenever a student, a parent comes to campus, what makes them feel safe. And then we're going to talk about the converse of that as well, those things that maybe not so, or make you feel unsafe. And then we're going to talk about campus preparedness efforts, what you may need to do to get your staff and your university or institution prepared for whatever may come your way. And then talk a little bit about practicing your plan, and very briefly talking about the media. And then at that point, we're going to be into the wrap-up mode. So we'll jump through this as quickly as we can. So this first one here, we need to help each other in building our plan. Sometimes a pat on the back creates a faceplant, but really there's a lot to learn from one another. I've learned more from my faceplants, my mistakes that I have made than many of my successes. So today we're going to learn a little bit from some of our mistakes or mistakes that we have seen by others. And Dave, take it away.
Yeah. So first is just kind of what's the definition of an emergency? So we've gone to the Webster Dictionary and dictionary.com, and the definition of an emergency is a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action, or an unforeseen combination of circumstances or the resulting state that calls for immediate action. So that's what we're using here as a emergency. And then, sorry, as the next slide, the then definition of a crisis, a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger, a time when a difficult or important decision must be made, a stage in a sequence of events at which the trend of all future events, especially for better or worse, is determined, a turning point. And finally, a dramatic, emotional, or circumstantial upheaval in a person's life. Those are our definitions of crisis that we're going off of. And so we're going to kind of talk through what are some of the crises or emergencies that we address on our campuses and really in our communities, in our cities or towns that we're going to be talking through. So these are the different types of things we had. When we've done this in person, we would be asking our group what types of things would we consider emergencies or crises on campus, and these are the things that were brainstormed. So flooding, tornadoes, hurricane, a shooting or active shooter, hostage situation, power outage, mold, fire, food poisoning, sexual predators on campus, fire alarm pranks, as well as real fire alarms, infectious diseases such as meningitis or norovirus, blizzards or other extreme weather, and then extreme alcohol or drug where it may be affecting a large group.
I think that there's a lot of other things too that some people have dealt with on your campuses, and things are changing all the time. We just had one here on our campus with a C. diff outbreak here, and there was just concerns that we needed to go and do a special cleaning method there that took 10 minutes to clean a doorknob. So, and because you had to wait for it to dry and keep it wet until 10 minutes had passed. So, but there's different emergencies, and what constitutes an emergency on your campus is really something where you need to define exactly how much preparedness you want to have.
Yep. And I think one of the things that's scary for us is as we first started putting this presentation back together, and really I think it was probably October of 2017, I think the sad world that we are living in is there's been, like, we know that we're going to be able to add more and more examples. So we started this before the whole Las Vegas shooting, before obviously the Florida shooting, and so we know that it's large events like this are happening, and we almost sadly on a daily, weekly, monthly basis are being able to add more and more examples of things, which is why we feel like we need to be doing this presentation so that each of our campuses are ready for not the if, but the when, that it's going to be affecting each of our communities.
So this is what an emergency might look like on your campus. So this is from a fire a few years back, but it can be a very dramatic thing, and something that, again, it's not that every campus will be affected by every one of these emergencies or crises, but we want to make sure that people are understanding the scope of what might occur at your campus. So we're going to go through some kind of a list of photos from various campuses, specifically focusing on some residence hall or housing specific emergencies. And so I think these are from a variety of our campuses. I'll kind of be guiding you through them, but I know that Brad and Dave will also have some stories to pipe in on here. So our first one is an interior fire. So we have some photos here of a fire that happens at one of the University of Wisconsin schools. and as well as a fire that's a little bit more historical that I think Brad and Dave can tell you a little bit more about.
Yeah, so in that lower right-hand corner, this is Deb Coffin, and she is one of our former AIMHO presidents, and she is now a vice chancellor at CU Boulder. So Deb is standing in the what used to be a doorway of a student bedroom, and this happens to be in a 612-person, 13-story residence hall high-rise. And the domino from that fire is the part that really hurts. So, because we had to deal with a fire, of course, but it's the other things that really add up. So, of course, we had to send 612 people to another place to live immediately that night, the night that it occurred. So we're talking temp housing, we're talking hotels, we're talking about how do they get there? Not all students have vehicles, the transportation back and forth. How do they get to meals? What about those students and what they have left behind? Things like their meds, their backpacks, their books, their clothing, their eyeglasses, contact solution, whatever. And then, things for class, books, backpacks, clothing, wallets, car keys. So, and then, we think about what a student leaves with when a fire alarm occurs, and it's not much. Sometimes we see people walking out in a pair of shorts and flip-flops. So if they're wearing any shoes at all. So this is something that, we try and work with our students on how to be a little bit more prepared and closing doors and locking doors, taking a little something with you, but not always do they do that. So trying to deal with some of the fallout on some of these things.
And a little while later, we're going to show you a picture of a piece of glass. It's just a shard of glass that happened from, or it could have happened from something like this. This fire took place on the 8th floor of a 13th floor story building. And for me, it was good to just have the visual of when we are evacuating our students out of our buildings. We're doing the fire alarm, and hopefully 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, it's just an alarm and not the real thing. But we always have to treat it as if it's the real thing. And I know for me where I'm at, we're moving students back, and they want to be as close as possible because as soon as the alarm's off, they want to get back in the building. But one of the things that we will see from this exact fire is shards of glass that were hundreds of yards away, multiple buildings away, and what some of the safety ramifications just from the fire and the glass being exploding out of when it got too hot. And so just kind of remember this slide from the 8th floor, and when we see that glass, we'll point that out later on as well. Obviously, other things that were affected with that, the fire in that situation was sprinklers going off, gallons and gallons and gallons, hundreds of gallons of water, on all throughout the building, and all the after effects of what to do, not only just for those immediate nights, but also your plan of action that needs to come into play for the next several months until people get cleared back in. So as I mentioned, I'm out in California, and you probably have heard of the recent fires that we've had in December. These are real photos from that were taken just off of my Facebook of pictures near our fire situation, our largest fire that has ever happened in California history. And this happened and affected, we have students that attend both Santa Barbara City College and the University of California, Santa Barbara. And so while the fires weren't on campus, they were in our community, roughly as much as 60 miles away, all the way up to probably 11 miles away. But the smoke, you see on the right side there, the smoke, we were at a point where we were breathing that, and ended up having to cancel classes, which happened to be finals week for both, for Westmont College, for Santa Barbara City College, and for UCSB. They, in their own, for our community, there was a erroneous text message sent out at 2 a.m. on Sunday before finals week saying, evacuate now. This was not done by our university. This was done by the county. And it ended up having a major impact on the university making a decision on whether they should cancel classes or not, because there was this erroneous message sent to over 80,000 people saying evacuate now, get out. So here are all these UC students and choosing to opt out to leave, and an hour later it was, sorry, this was sent erroneously, and due to that we weren't in any immediate danger other than the health risks of breathing the smoke, but because of that our chancellor ended up canceling finals week and having to make tough decisions, which is some of the things that we would be talking through here on how to be prepared and what steps do you take on emergency preparedness. And so one of the things that in that example, they chose to close class that week and send everyone home because we knew that it was not going to be taken care of for almost a month. And they elected in this case to have finals week be the first week back in January of 2018. So a massive impact for us in that situation. So that was the fire. We can move on to the next slide.
All right. So these are some photos of some flooding in residence halls. This is probably one of the more common, unfortunately, things that we deal with, whether it's from a sprinkler head or other facilities issues related to some of our interior plumbing, whether it's fresh water or drain water. Those are some things that we see and will commonly affect quite a few residents, and if they're not cleaned up properly and addressed pretty quickly, they're going to cause massive issues, much like our next slide. So this is some mold growth that we saw in a room. This one was actually not necessarily from a broken pipe or anything like that, but just more of some improper window sealing and some improper water coming in from the outside, but HVAC too. Yeah, as well as some HVAC issues and the air not circulating quite like we would want it to. And so this is something that we saw here at the University of Northern Colorado in a space that was vacant, and certainly changed some of our processes in terms of making sure that we do have staff periodically checking into those vacant spaces to make sure everything's looking good, because this one I don't believe was checked for a month or two, and we resulted in quite a bit of work, as you might be able to guess based on that photo.
The next photo here, we're talking about an oddball event, but we had a couple of highly intoxicated individuals who launched a vehicle. This is a 3/4-ton diesel pickup that was launched from an intersection at over 65 miles an hour. It actually careens off of the wall of the building and lands down in this lower area here. It's kind of a terraced area. This particular set of individuals actually hit a dry stack, loosely stacked rock wall, and that rock wall sent a rock the size that it is just slightly smaller than a basketball through one of our occupant windows whenever this occurred. Now, this is one you certainly can't plan for, but that rock went over the bed of a student who was in bed at that time. So this is one that could have resulted in a significant amount of injuries, because this is a highly used intersection with a lot of students, but at the time of night that they hit, thankfully there was nobody there. But this is one that you don't typically get to see. Down at the, well, on the right-hand side there, you see some bikes there in that center picture. He plowed through a whole mess of student bikes, bike racks, big metal, like 120-pound trash cans that he punted, I don't remember, 30, 40 yards with his vehicle. So we dodged a serious bullet here. He thankfully took a glancing blow off the building. Otherwise, he possibly could have come into the building with that heavy vehicle. So as you can see down below, we're not the only ones. It does occur. Sadly, we have to be thinking in terms of people who maybe want to harm us or accidentally harm us. And are there some things that you can do to mitigate in your landscaping, in the way that you design around residence halls, to make sure that vehicles are not going to be an issue and potentially harming students?
Yeah, so our next slide is on flooding, and Jed had a picture a couple slides earlier with the residence hall flooding, and which could be a result from fire as well. But the pictures on the bottom here are also in result to our last fire situation in California, and it had an impact on our schools and big decisions that we had to be making as it relates to our emergency plan. So the bottom picture there is what the Highway 101 looks like normally, and after the fires took place, obviously everything that it did to the topsoil and the rolling hills of Montecito, where our friends Oprah and Ellen DeGeneres and many other celebrities, along with Westmont College, when the rain came down, we had, it was really a series of unfortunate events with massive rains. I think we had over an inch of rain in 5 minutes, which, prior to California, when our droughts, that was more than we had in the prior year. And so all those kind of combining to this, so you can see what our Highway 101 looked like. So for about a 2-week period, we had no access to the major road that goes from here to LA was the 101. Which meant all of our teaching staff, all of the faculty and staff, to all the local elementary schools, but also to Santa Barbara City College and to UCSB, if they lived on the other side of this, they could no longer get to class and to run their jobs. So it effectively shut down much of the universities. And it actually delayed Santa Barbara City College. They made the tough decision on a Saturday night when schools started on Monday, the new semester. They ended up having to make some tough decisions using their emergency planning to say, hey, we're going to postpone everything 1 week. And, obviously a lot of Monday morning quarterback of was that the right decision, whatever. But I'm hoping that they had plans of action in play to say, here's all the domino effects of decisions that they made. And they ended up postponing everything 1 week, which meant in May, when we would have been done May 12th, now we're finishing May 19th, which has an impact on summer conferences and, everyone else, international plans. And so a massive thing for us that we had to undertake here.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are in a place where we're able to say, oh, yeah, let's just go ahead and shift by a week here or there. There's a lot of things that go into the operations of residence halls and housing operations here that you need to have some ability to flex, but sometimes it's beyond your control, and trying to make sure that you can meet the needs whenever some others are making decisions that have a direct impact on you without any coordination or consideration for what it does to other operations.
Yep, and also in both of these situations and in many situations, the university is the largest place in the community that has the ability to be the Red Cross Center, be the shelter. A lot of our gymnasiums may end up being a place for people to come and sleep, and so that's another area where we as housing need to be ready to handle these. We had a power outage during this situation. We had no water in the whole town of Montecito and no potable water, and so those were issues that we also had to quickly brainstorm and figure out how to solve. So.
All right, so this next one is just an example of some more severe weather that you might see. You can see that photo that Dave had talked about a little bit earlier of some glass that has embedded itself on a gymnasium floor, as well as a couple of photos of tornadoes touching down. I believe that's at CU's Anschutz Medical Campus here in Denver, there in the foreground. So those are certainly things that can affect any sort of campus, especially in parts of AIMHO that might be a little bit more weather prone. We also certainly have power outage issues. If you're anything like the University of Northern Colorado, your local power provider maybe isn't always up to the job of powering your residence halls. So we do sometimes have some issues like that, whether they're temporary, just little blips in power provided, or extended outages will sometimes occur, and so you need to be prepared to deal with that. That can mean everything from just providing lights for people to be able to find their way within a darkened residence hall environment, especially in a situation where you have more traditional halls that are maybe double-loaded corridors where there are no windows to provide light to the interior because you're saving all those windows for the resident rooms. Or even in the case of an extended outage, you may need to be able to provide alternate ways of folks reaching out to your staff on duty, whether that's radios or other means of communicating. Certainly, that will also take down some building systems like fire suppression and fire detection that you need to be aware of.
Also with this, you need to look at what do you have for battery backup. So maybe it is that interior corridor that Jed was talking about, that do you have the little bug-eye lights that provide light? Well, how long is that going to last? How often are people servicing those batteries? Things like, some backup generated power. So that's something that not all of our campuses have the ability to say, well, we can run off the grid. You're fortunate if you can, and maybe some portion of your operation can. Maybe it just works for backup lights, and maybe it's something to allow your elevator to come to the bottom floor and open up. Those are different things that you should be looking at on your campus to make sure that you've got the ability to still take care of business. At your front desk, if you have no power, how long is your phone going to operate? Are you using a VoIP phone or still using a more archaic phone that maybe is going to work just fine? But those are some of the considerations that you need to consider here.
All right. So talking a little bit, this slide seems to be not in the right order. So what are some things that might make you feel safe is our next question. So what are some of those things that affect your perception of safety? So Brad, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about some of those?
Yeah. So in talking about safety there, when people come to campus, and I'm talking largely when new students, parents come along, they're looking at your campus and saying, okay, but does this make me feel safe or not? And so here's just a laundry list of some of those things that might be helpful in promoting safety. So obviously safety cameras, and are they visible? Is it something where people can see displays at your front desk, or is something where they're able to have a better idea of exactly what is being surveilled on your campus? So emergency poles, those poles that hopefully have the blue light on them, that flash at night with a call box that they're able to reach out to your campus safety. And then just what about nighttime lighting? Is it lit well? Is it something where it feels bright enough that I can walk down pathways into parking lots? Are there dark spots around the entries to your buildings? And some of that could be affected by your landscaping. So do you have trees that go right to the ground and could be a great place to conceal somebody who maybe has bad intentions? And then also looking at your staffing. So who do you have on call every night, and who do you have that my student can come to if I need help? Is there a front desk? Do they do rounds? How often do they do that? Talking about rounds, I'm going to jump to the police force. Does your police force or security or whatever you have do rounds in your building? Do they have a presence in your facility? In our campus, I feel very fortunate. Our folks are very, very involved and willing to go on rounds with RAs, and for our students to see police on their floor, not a big deal. It's not something where they say, uh-oh, what's going on? Why are they here? No, we have a very healthy relationship with them, and we want them in our halls all the time. So it gives them something to do. It makes a great tie with our staff. And then proximity of vehicles, we talked a little bit about that earlier, to make sure that a vehicle isn't going to be potentially causing harm to students or the facility. And then also, what about your cleanup? What do you do whenever something has been damaged? How quickly do you get that turned around, graffiti removed, lights repaired, bloodborne pathogens cleaned up, whatever it might be? So those are pieces that do make a difference in people's perception of safety.
I want to just chime in real quick on the security camera piece, because I think this is a shift from the general public's view. I think over the last, 15 to 20 years, I remember coming in and it was kind of the feel of, oh, well, if you have to have safety cameras, security cameras here, then it must not be safe. And I think that has shifted to, I feel safe because there's security camera. I know there's accountability, and there's going to be, if something happens, Big Brother's watching, and something may be able to be done about it. So I think a shift that's happened over the last 20 years.
So in terms of some things that might make you feel unsafe, I think Dave will talk a little bit about some of those.
And so a lot of these are simply the opposite of things that made you feel safe, but so not having security cameras, not having the emergency poles and the flashing light and the call box available every so often, or having lots of dark areas around campus with the poor lighting. The landscaping, having places for people to hide that are not well lit, not having enough students, RA staff, hall director staff, people. I mean, those are all things that should help with people either feeling safe or unsafe if you have not enough. And are they doing rounds? And are they physically around and present? Some of that may be the front desk, and how often and how long should the front desk be staffed? What's the expectation there? Is it business hours? Is it extended business hours, 10 p.m.? Is it 24-hour desks? If there's no or minimal police force, or even if there is a police force, but it takes 30 to 40 minutes for a response, that has an impact. And then, as Brad talked about earlier, the proximity to vehicles. Are they parking 5 feet from the building, or is there some distance there for safety reasons? And then again, if it takes 2 to 3 weeks to clean up graffiti, or to turn out or to fix lights and all those things, a lot of those are just the opposite of the feeling safe. So. Other things related to that are negative media exposure. When your campus gets on the news as to, did we do this the right way, and the Monday morning quarterback, and so those are things that we want to. How quickly did we respond to some incident that took place? I'm dealing with something on my campus right now where we sent some emergency alert to our students, but we didn't send it to our guarantors, and our guarantors are upset that we didn't, send it to them as well. And so, there's some potential negative media exposure, or I'm going to send this to the local news, and so those are things that could have major impacts for your university. We had, you may recall a couple of years ago, a former student that went on a killing rampage out in Isla Vista, California, Elliot Rogers, and he was a former student, and they made sure to note that it was a former Santa Barbara City College student, and he's 24 years old or something like that, and he was no longer a student, but they wanted to place blame, and that had an impact on Santa Barbara City College. And what is Santa Barbara City College doing? And they didn't necessarily even have any. There was no resources or whatever, because that he was off the grid. So a slow response, and I think that's some of what you would need to talk through when you're dealing with your plan. Is that a slow response could be 72 hours, or it could be a month. But are you responding quickly enough? And in this day and age, with iPhones and videos being instantaneously on YouTube and shared on the World Wide Web, probably faster than slower is a smart response. And then the perceived cover-ups, how we answer to certain things, or I'm going to choose to decline to comment. Is that the right way to go? Is it better to be upfront and honest? Those are parts of the plans that would need to be discussed when you're coming up with your emergency plan.
I think there's several times whenever there's just been negative media exposure due to things that were absolutely beyond your control, or there's something where, you've got sexual assaults that have occurred on your campus, or in our case, we had a punter who stabbed the other punter because they wanted to make sure that they had the starting role. Now, that's the sort of thing that just doesn't help with recruitment. But it's also something where, people start to say, what's going on at that campus? And, most people can be realistic about some of this, but if you have multiple incidents, boy, that can have a huge impact on your ability to recruit and retain students.
So a few things in terms of perceptions. I think that's largely where those feelings of safety or lack of safety come from, is what that perception that your students have, that their parents and family members have, and again, largely the community has. So you want to help to manage those and to make sure that that perception is really a part of your overall plan. And again, that can also play into doing what you say you will do. That's a huge part of your policies being out there and how people are perceiving you as being prepared. And it also has a legal aspect to it. You can have the worst policy in the world, and as long as you're following it, your legal folks are probably going to try to cover you with that policy and then help you improve it for next time. But if you're going off book, then you're going to have some additional issues.
And I'll just chime in on the legal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Jed. Just that one of my main things I remember learning in my graduate program at Northern Colorado was that 95% of the cases where the university was held responsible and lost their court case was when they did not follow their own policies. And so, and like Jed said, even if it's as ridiculous as a policy as you think it may be, generally the student has agreed when they signed the dotted line that, yep, I'm going to go there. They said, okay, I'm going to abide by those rules. But when we didn't follow our own rules that we said that we were going to follow, that's where that, big bucks were lost in a lawsuit.
Absolutely. So again, a little bit more on this piece. We've said it several times in this presentation thus far, but many of these things are not a matter of whether or not that they will happen, but when it will happen. And so having some of those policies, procedures, thoughts in place for how might we deal with this situation, how might we deal with this situation, are critical. You also want to have a good grasp of how much you're going to share with other folks. If you publish exactly where folks are going to evacuate to in an active shooter situation, that might not be the best information to have out there, because the person who might be considering perpetrating that sort of an act on your campus might have access to that and plan around it. And so you want to be cautious about how widely some information is shared. And again, that all plays into how does it make people feel safe, or is it making them feel discomfort, uneasiness, that sort of thing. And a lot of those foundations are built at your new student orientation. They're built in those first floor meetings. They're built in your RA training as you're preparing folks, whether it's with a sort of a behind closed doors type of situation to get them a little bit more comfort with dealing with things, or other training methods that we'll talk about here in just a moment.
I would also add that all of us have emergency alert opportunities. Not all campuses have them, but the vast majority do. I would encourage you to get yourself on the team that really is thoughtful about what message goes out and when and to whom. All those things, on our campus, that's a measure of our campus safety, our university police, and our IT department for putting those things out. There are certain instances where we may not want to blast something over all of the speakers out on the campus, but we may want it just in a residence hall. How much granularity do you have? How much flexibility might you have? Sometimes you might be telling an active shooter where you're sending the people. And so those are pieces where we weigh those things out a little bit. And so just to be thoughtful, and hopefully you've got an opportunity to be part of that decision making.
And finally, with a perception, I want to highlight that here's what actually is happening, and the plan of having an emergency plan, and then there's also the perception of it, and many of the perceptions are obviously things that when people are coming to the campus and they're seeing, oh, I feel safe, and so if you don't have those perceptions, students may never even choose to come to the campus because I don't feel safe. But having those things in play may allow them to say, okay, I feel comfortable coming here, and it may also detour someone that does want to do a crime there because there's too many ways that I can be held accountable, and I'm not gonna choose to do this because there's a safe campus or a safer campus. So moving on, looks like we're moving on to what an emergency may require. And so the emergencies in some cases are immediate and on your campus, and they could be in your building, they could be the power is out in your building, and so we've kind of already talked a little bit about this. This is the 101 closure, and we had to all of a sudden be ready to house 50 extra people. Brad mentioned the fire in Turner Hall with 612 people. What was the game plan for housing 612 people that night? Was it, hey, tonight go find your own place and we'll come up with a game plan for the remaining couple days? And obviously, many of these are going to be case-by-case situations, but having a general plan on here's how we would do this. In this particular case, this was something where our community is about 120,000 people in the Santa Barbara and Montecito surrounding areas. And we had many students and many families that had literally lost their homes. And it was, what is the campus community going to do to help out and be a first aid center? And how are we going to distribute food and get people showers? And how are we going to do that while still having class? We had an entire elementary school that lost their school, and now they're having their campus meet on the Santa Barbara City College property. And it was, in 24 hours, we had to kind of figure out how are we going to deal with that. And to some degree, we'll punt and we'll figure it out while we're going. And luckily, people being flexible and having a generous heart, saying we're going to figure this out. We know it's not perfect, but having game plans set up ahead of time will help us deal with emergency when they happen.
So we're going to move to another one here. Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
Same idea. This is a picture of was this the Thunderdome, or the Katrina victims, I think. Right. But this could be us using our auditoriums or our large venues again, that the larger communities are expecting us to come and help out, and setting up cots and serving food and showers and all the things that are in play, and how to handle a mass crisis.
Our campuses are large enough that we're typically a campus partner to a city or a county where they're looking to campuses to be able to help in emergencies. So it may be something, again, that doesn't happen on our campus but happens in our community. We had a tornado that came relatively close to our community, and we all of a sudden are housing displaced people. Well, guess what? Those people came with families. Those people came with pets. Those people came with a host of different issues that we needed to try and mitigate. as we were trying to be a good community partner. So those are the sort of things that your campus could be a resource. Your campus could be a morgue. And guess what? They like those big walk-in coolers that a lot of our campuses have, should they have to move a number of bodies in a hurry. So these are sad things to think about, but that's a very real possibility if it comes to a significant crisis in your community.
So moving on to ways that we can prepare, I think one of the things that I would highly recommend is, what are the main emergencies and crises that do happen in your neck of the woods? So for me, that's power outages, fires, and mudslides. Those have been the things. And so we have first done those and said, okay, here's what we're going to do when and if we have these things that are more often. And obviously during our limited time of RA training and RD training, those are things that we spend a little more time on than the things that are maybe less likely to happen, like some of our other things that have been on these slides. But that doesn't mean that we don't address those, but we've just said, hey, we're going to try to tackle the things that are major. I know when I was at Northern Colorado, we had tornadoes every summer, so we needed to know what to do in case of a tornado. Our friends in Florida, they have to know what to do with a hurricane, so on and so forth. So I think for those main ones that are absolutely things that are likely to happen, having a written plan and here's what we're going to do, here's how here's who's going to be the point person, and then training the team on the plan and practicing it, using maybe other stakeholders that are involved, like police or fire and other departments that could be in play, and saying, hey, we're going to practice this. It's ongoing. Training is ongoing. I think one of the downsides of Res Life is that every year we have a new crop of staff. So we may be thinking from a leadership stance that, oh, we've done that. We've trained those folks. And nope, we have new RDs that come in each year, and very much so new RAs. So it's something that we need to do all the time. And I would say likely in services throughout the year where we're having time for this training, and that we're making it a priority. It's on our written agendas, and we know that we're going to spend time doing this throughout the year. Common sense would go a long way, and I think when you have a written plan and you've practiced it, a lot of things are going to come to play. Like, okay, well, common sense would tell me, because I did this in other plans, this is how I would do this, because this is what we did in other plans. So, developing those relationships across campus and maybe even across the community with other key stakeholders is critical. And then learning terminology. I just learned that MCI, I think that's right, multiple crisis, or we had an incident with heroin that just took place. This is 4 nights ago. We had a call out for heroin in our local community, and next thing you know, we had 9 ambulances coming because 9 students had an overdose on heroin. And knowing their language, all the different acronyms that are out there are good for us to know. The first responder, and then who's going to be the incident commander, and just who's the right point of contact, POC, and who's going to be the person to talk to the media and representing the university, and is an RA or are they a student? And when they're speaking freely, do you have a plan that, nope, you're supposed to have all your staff be the point person, and they know who the point person is. So.
All right, so I think Dave hit a little bit on some of this practicing your plan piece. So again, having manuals, policies in place are critical. Also having some memorandums of understanding or MOUs with other organizations. We hit on that a little bit, how your community might be relying on you to be a center of crisis relief or other things for the community, and it probably would behoove you to also develop those with some other folks in the community. I know that our institution has some MOUs with some local churches and other places that might be able to help house our students if we did have another large issue. There is also a huge value in doing some tabletop training sessions. I think we could probably do a whole other webinar about how we've done those. So if that's something that you would like to learn more about, I think probably any of the three of us would be happy to connect a little bit later offline. If you're on the presentation right now, or if you're listening to the recording later, please feel free to connect with any of us about that. So those next few pieces talk a little bit about how to run that tabletop training, thinking about who should be involved, who should be a part of that training. And so those are all critical pieces. We also want to talk a little bit about your typical emergency timeline, and making sure that you're really thinking about what will happen. So who responds first, who gets notified, how is that notification put out to the larger campus community, how is that notification put out to other critical stakeholders, including folks like your general counsel or legal counsel. How are you collecting information about those that are affected, and how are you getting it back up to those stakeholders? And again, how is communication happening between all the agencies before media is notified? You want to make sure that, again, those critical stakeholders are aware of what is going on before they find out about it on 9 News. And again, the most critical part is probably reviewing and evaluating and improving your plan after you have a crisis.
Yeah, these are living documents. We've got to make sure that we're keeping things up to date. We've got the new updates of information and resources always on task here. Next one here, Dave.
Yeah. So just our role in campus safety, and obviously our first and foremost responsibility is the care of our students and staff. And I would also include our facilities and our property, that those are things that we're keeping an eye on and making sure we're keeping safe. And then the impact that it has to the greater campus community and maybe even the local community. And then considering the instant communication with the media and social media, how quickly things get out, and then what our response is going to be in that. We've already talked to that to some degree. Designating the point person, and that's probably someone that you would be talking through. And I guess the larger the university, there's that's more than likely someone's sole responsibility, because they're probably constantly in the news, and they're the ones that are the point person to the local media. But then the smaller you are, who is that point person, and who should and who should not speak, and who are they representing when they're speaking, and what hat I guess they're wearing when they're speaking, and then just a lot of times things are happening in the residence halls, and who's the one speaking with the dean of students and the president or dean or the chancellor of the university or whatever. What's the proper communication there? Likely one person or one page memo or whatever to the correct person, so you're giving accurate information. And then obviously all of the legal issues that we need to be aware of, your own, as we mentioned earlier, your own policies. Are you following your own policies? What is the state law, and FERPA and HIPAA Act and stuff like that? Along those lines, the basic leadership during a crisis. Again, when you have because we don't know who, when, or where it's going to happen, and who's on duty, and who's working, and who's not, coming up with the communication tree of kind of if this, and who's going to be the first responder, and what if they're not the top-ranked person, but they're the first responder, walking through that with your plan. Who makes sense? Are they the ones running it until someone else gets there and is in charge, or is it until the police get in charge? Just really walking through what the communication line is and communication tree is during a leadership. And then obviously that has an impact on who's making decisions, and if you're differing from or going off of those decisions, why are you going off? Is it because you think it's terribly wrong, or the massive consequences are going to happen because of those decisions? But generally, if there's a plan of action in line, we should be following those plan of action, and that the leader in that role should be making those decisions. Caring for others during the event as well as after the event, which could be months afterwards, making sure there's counseling and places for staff to go handle. I know at Northern Colorado we had a hostage situation happen while I was there, and we were caring for our students in that, but we also needed to care for our staff who had to handle some very difficult situations, watching a person be shot, or watching them go out in a bag afterwards. And, those were things that were good for us to be able to do as counseling afterwards. And then follow up in the documentation, which could be hundreds of pages of documentation, or it could be something simple. But then, as Jed alluded to earlier, the follow-up, what could we have done better? What should we change for next time? What wasn't realistic within our plan? Or maybe it's something new and we need to create a plan for this. And then again, with the written plan, how would we redo this next time, given the circumstances that we had this time?
All right, so there's a few other additional resources in here. Recognizing that we're pretty much at our time, I want to make sure that we just talk about these. A great resource for you to get a little bit more well-versed is the Incident Command System training resource that's offered through the U.S. government as a part of FEMA, and I'd absolutely recommend that. Again, a great thing to talk with any of the three of us offline. And a part of that is also the, I believe it's National Incident Management System little guidebook here. That is a great thing to have around when you have those larger crises or emergencies where you have some of those first responder, police, fire department type folks there. They can help you out with that. And then finally, we just wanted you to have all of our contact information here. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of the three of us.
Thank you very much.
Do we want to leave any time for?
If anybody does have any questions, they're welcome to put them in the chat here, and we could visit a little bit longer if people want to hang around for a minute or two. We recognize that we're at our time boundary, though, so thank you very much. If there are questions, shoot them our way.
All right. As folks are typing in any last questions, just want to thank you again, Brad, Jed, and Dave, for taking time to share your knowledge with us today. We really appreciate all that you're doing to share this information with our members and help us all really start to plan for these emergencies that might come up. For everybody watching, as a reminder, this webinar was recorded and it's going to be posted at our AIMHO 365 YouTube page. You can find the link on our aimho.org website if you wanted to review it or return to anything that was talked about today. If you would please take just a few minutes to fill out the online survey that's going to pop up on your screen in just a few seconds here, that would be amazing. We definitely thank you in advance for that. And just thank you one more time, Brad, Jed, and Dave, for your presentation today. We really appreciate you. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Bye.